Mr. Beatty, how you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
Let's see. How you?
I'm doing pretty good.
How's it going? Let me adjust my audio. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. All right. I'm just getting everything together. Thank you for accepting my invitation.
Thank Nada. Thank you for sending it to me.
Hmm.
And I meant to comment right under Malcolm on LinkedIn saying
Hmm.
so. Well, it worked out.
Cool. Cool, cool. Let me see. Okay, perfect. This it. Get all my little assets together. And let me change it so I don't have to admit people. You could just stroll on in. Welcome, welcome. Welcome on in. Like that, like that. I think I close that. Closing all the unnecessary tabs.
That's what I'm doing right now. I'm looking through. I was like, I don't need this anymore. That,
Right. Hey, Elle, welcome in. Okay, I'll have to fix it for later. Cool, cool, cool. All right. Mr. Beatty, some things never leave you. I feel like I'm back on FAMU campus, like, oh, it says we're going to start at this time. So,
mm-mm.
bite my tongue.
One day I'll make
One day, what?
that. One day I'll make it back.
Look, they need you. I bumped into so when I left, there was a new professor coming in. I don't remember his first name, but his last name is Lundy. And he started teaching the entrepreneurship class. And I recently met his brother, who's in SBI as well. He teaches accounting.
The counting fun.
Very, very, very fun. Cool. Welcome in, everybody. We will give it just a couple more minutes, despite everything in me that's ready to start right now. But we'll give it a couple more minutes. While we're waiting, though, drop in the chat where you're tuning in from. I'm currently physically in Tallahassee. I recently relocated to the DMV area and I bumped into someone and I was like, "You here visiting?" I was like, "Oh, yeah, I don't live here for real anymore." So we got Jacksonville, Louisville, if I'm saying it right, because I know you don't pronounce all those, all the letters there. Okay. I see Lisa. I'm in, okay, Newport News. We got Tallahassee. And I think we may have some DMV representation as well. So we'll be getting started in probably just 1 to 2 more minutes. This is going to be a weekly convening, so you can come in, take what you need, implement what you can throughout the week, and then come back the next Sunday with questions or points where you got stuck. But I'll just kind of get everybody on the same page. I know we are, well, I know most everybody from a different part of my work. Shared some with my LinkedIn colleagues, some with some business owners that I had the privilege of being connected to from a conference, and just wanted to really kind of bring all these different geniuses, right? Bring everybody together in this space where we can actively do some work and measurably creating wealth within our families and communities, and in the process, closing the racial wealth gap. So one more minute and then we'll officially get started. So if you need to get the kids together, because I know it's Sunday evening, if you need to run into the bathroom, whatever you need to do, we got a couple seconds. And welcome in for folks that are just joining us. We were just sharing earlier in the chat where everyone was tuning in from. I think we got most of the Southeast covered. Got a couple folks in Florida, different parts of Florida, Newport News, Louisville, Kentucky, Maryland. So if you're just joining and you want to share where you're tuning in from, we love to know where the rest of the family is. And I'm making sure I have all my tabs. All right. All right. So we'll go ahead and get started. Let's see. So we got Gainesville, Tallahassee, via Jamaica, aka South. Greetings from Maryland. All right, very cool, very cool. So we'll go ahead and get started. One of the things that I was sharing with family members who had gotten on right at 5 is this is going to be a weekly convening. I'm looking forward to really kind of unpacking what dynastic wealth is, and more than that, like how do we do it? So to really kind to like kick things off formally, I like to welcome you to the last day of the second quarter of 2024. Tomorrow starts quarter 3. That means we literally have a half a year in front of us. This is also the first, I like to say the first public meeting of dynastic wealth. Like I've been talking about dynastic wealth for the last year and a half. I was sharing with some interns recently that if I ever am in a room and I have my mouth open, I'm talking about Black entrepreneurship, I'm talking about Black wealth transfer, and I'm talking about dynastic wealth. But it's usually been in a speaking environment or a training environment. This is really where I think the work gets done. And I'm Dr. LaTanya White. I hadn't even done that. Dr. LaTanya White, I'm the founder and creator of the framework for dynastic wealth. So it emerged from my dissertation research, which I'll make sure that you all have easy access to if you need to pull any statistics, pull any data or research that contributes to your work or to who you are as a founder or someone that works with Black founders specifically. So welcome to the Dynastic Wealth family and community. And what that means really is, and I'll go ahead for my visual learners because I gotta always make sure my visual learners are good. So Dr. LaTanya White, an award-winning entrepreneurship educator and researcher. I actually taught entrepreneurship for 11 years on the highest of 7 hills. So I know there are a few rattlers in the room. You can feel free to, strike and strike again. I'm also a Fulbright specialist in business administration education. And if you're familiar with the Fulbright program, or if you aren't familiar, let me say it that way. It's a program by the U.S. Department of State. It's a cultural exchange program. So while most people know about Fulbright Scholars, which focuses on students and researchers and faculty, the Fulbright Specialist is for practitioners. So they rely on you transferring knowledge from your expertise to teach and train people from other parts of the world. If you're interested in maybe getting on their radar, they do a rolling 6-week application. It's probably one of the easiest applications I've done. And of course, we're underrepresented. on the Fulbright roster. So just message me and we can talk through what your Fulbright experience and application might look like. So, I also am a congressional witness on racial equity and entrepreneurship. So, a lot of what we will be learning in our time together, the questioning, the application, the implementation in your family. I've been asked by the Senate Committee on Small Business and Entrepreneurship to put it on congressional record so that that particular committee can make the case for continuing to fund programs like the Minority Business Development Center, the 8A program, and really making this evidence-based case for why diversity, equity, and inclusion, which if you're in Florida, you know those are curse words, why those things are still warranted and needed. I'm a TEDx speaker, mom to Sparrow, and a Black wealth futurist. So I focus on the future of Black wealth and from an asset-based perspective. There's a lot of research and a lot of discussion about the racial wealth gap. People have been writing about it and talking about it for years. But my goal with these calls, with the Dynastic Wealth Family Calls, is for us to take action on how we in our households, we in our families, and we in our communities, like how do we actually close the racial wealth gap? Like no one talks about that. We hear a lot about generational wealth, but as we'll be connecting with each other throughout this time, and however many Sundays you have available to drop into the calls, we'll be talking about how to make that change within your own lived experience, and up close, in a way that's really up close. So I also would love to know like who is in the room, especially as the calls get bigger. I want to make sure that we are able to connect with each other. I feel like should be some opportunities for you all to find to build partnerships as you're growing your business. I know there are some legal professionals, there are some educators, there are some inventors, there are some innovators. So I definitely want to make sure that there's space and opportunity for you all to connect with each other. So if you want to before I do that, by show of emoji or reaction, how many MacBook users are there in the room? And I'm one. Okay, iPhone users. Okay, we got one. Okay, a handful of them. Okay, so the reason that I ask, and I had to kind of stop myself as I was thinking about this. I use the keyboard, the text replacement a lot. And the reason that I ask for those who might be Mac users or iPhone users, iOS users, anywhere besides that. So one of the things, okay, for sure, LaTanya, one of the reasons that I asked, next question, are you using your text replacement feature on your iOS device? Does it sound familiar? Okay. So, well, one example of it, and it's built into your phone, especially if you're an iPhone user, if you're texting somebody and you start to type OM and it'll start to try to predict what you're going to say. If you type in OMW, it'll automatically text on my way, right? So I want to share with you for those that find yourself, especially if you're a founder, an entrepreneur, you're filling out applications all the time. You're typing your business name and your business address all the time. I want to share this feature with you. It's called text replacement. And I know it's on the iPhone and the Mac. I'm sure there's a Samsung or Android way to do it, but I don't know how to do that, y'all. So apologies. So in the settings on the iOS, and I'm on my Mac, I go to keyboard and then go to text. And if I can make this a little bit bigger, I don't think I can make it any bigger. But one of the things you see are all of these like shortcuts. So I'll pull up an email really quickly just so that you can see how I use the text replacement. And then what this even has to do with dynastic wealth, right? It's really about how do we make the best use of the time that we have. And if there's a way to be more efficient in doing it, then I promise you, we got to find a way because there's so much other work that we need to be doing. So we're going here. I'm in my desktop. And let's say I'm completing an application. It's asked me for my name, my title, my firm name, my bio. I don't have to go to a document because I used to have it. I still have it in a Google file. I would copy and paste it, go back to the doc. I don't have to do all of that now. So on the iOS system under text and text replacement, I've built all of the things I'm always typing as a text replacement. And the reason that came to mind is because I was going to ask everybody to just text or type in their intro in the chat. But if you don't have it like top of mind, or if you don't have it copied or pasted somewhere, then it might take you 2 or 3 minutes really just to figure out, what do I even want to say? Like, how do I introduce the Lisa J. Goggins experience to a room full of people that I've never met? Or how do I describe the best, which is a combination portable book bag that converts into a desk, right? If you hadn't been in the practice of pitching yourself all the time. So before we leave the call today, especially if you're an iOS user, please play around with the text replacement. You see it here. I have my email address, my firm name, my Gmail address, my websites, my intro, I don't even know what that is like. So I have so many things in here because I was always typing them. And because again, I just never know first of all, when am I going to need that brain capacity for something else? And then secondarily, how do I make the best use of the time I have when I'm sharing these spaces with spaces like this with people like you? So that was a long way of saying, if you want to just drop your introduction in the chat, I would love to know like who's in the room. I'll give everybody maybe a minute or two to kind of gather your thoughts, and text or type what kind of work you do. I know where most everybody is from the icebreaker, but would love to know who's in the room. And then that gives me a way to get everybody connected based on where your needs and things are from what I know. So next time I'll have some background music for this part, but next time you'll also have it in your text replacement. So it won't even take that long. All right, so now I get to check the chat, get caught up on the chat. Bring back some mangoes from Jamaica. Suggested testing. Yes, Ebony. All right. Cool. Glad that y'all found that valuable. And y'all already saw I can type my intro with 6 words. So let's see. All right. Hey Sean, welcome in. All right. Glad to know you. Elle is an author and the founder or CEO. I want to make sure I had the title right, of Cleverly Changing. Perfect. So when you do your keyboard replacement, you'll add that to it. Yeah. Very cool. All right. So, as you all are continue to share your introductions, I also want to kind of elevate one of the reasons why we're here. So I was mentioning this before about the racial wealth gap. There's a lot of research on it, but still even though there's a lot of research on it, not everyone is aware of what it is. And a part of the work that I do as a former educator, now I consider myself a scholar practitioner. I really do my work as a researcher, a consultant, and a policy advisor that's from an evidence-based and scholarly perspective. And that research is on dynastic wealth and the racial wealth gap. So one of the things that took me, like how I got to giving my heart and soul to a computer for 5 years in grad school, and y'all can see I still have a little bit of PTSD around it. But one of the things that got me there was I was teaching and was trying to figure out why there were so few students that were enrolling in the entrepreneurship course that I was teaching on campus. The university at the time had a university enrollment of close to 10,000 students, but I would only have 10 or 12 students that would enroll in the class, and I couldn't figure out why. And I did some due diligence, like did some digging around, and then learned that there was a prerequisite course that was required. But that prerequisite was only mandatory for students from either business school or journalism school majors. And I'm not sure how long it's been since you had to figure out, I only get 12 electives, and they want me to use 2 electives for one class. So the likelihood of that was slim to none. And that's how I learned why there were so few students enrolling in entrepreneurship class. So me being entrepreneurial, which doesn't always go over very well in academia, I went to the curriculum chair and asked if we could just remove the prerequisites. I literally thought it was that simple. But anybody in higher ed or taught in higher ed or taught in education at all right, it's never that simple, right? We know it's never that simple. So, exactly. So, what I realized from this back and forth that I went through, very professional, right? Back and forth that I went through in email was that I was advocating for teaching or making entrepreneurship education more accessible, but I didn't have the reasoning or the logic I was just coming at it literally from my heart. But when I found that I wasn't making any headway, I did the Holy Spirit, because I don't think I would have come to this idea to go to grad school just to prove a point on my own. But that's how I ended up in grad school. So what I'll do from here is introduce you to the research that really helped me make the connection and make the argument as to why access to entrepreneurship education was important. So, and when I found this article, I was like, this is it. This is the argument that I needed 3 years ago, because it took 3 years to find a program, to apply, and all of those things. But there was a study that showed that when you take a Black household and a white household and you give them the same amount of money, the household, but one has earned their money through entrepreneurship and the other has earned their money through employment. The entrepreneurial household will experience economic mobility faster. They will be on a pathway to wealth that moves faster than the household that has earned the same amount of income from their employment endeavors. And so when I came across that article and I saw the outcomes, this researcher actually studied, you see it here, the importance of entrepreneurship for wealth concentration and wealth mobility. He studied that particular variable, those factors, in 2 different studies. And in both studies, it showed that entrepreneurship created access to wealth mobility or economic mobility faster. And I was like, this is it. This is the article that I need to take to make the argument to make it easier for any student on any campus to get access to entrepreneurship education in a structured way. This is it. But I was in the middle of my program. And what tends to happen is when you come across some research that makes you know that you aren't crazy, you're like, okay, I need more. And that's how I ended up conducting my dissertation research on the relationship between Black entrepreneurship and the racial wealth gap. And there were a couple of findings that we'll kind of walk through. But the main thing that we're here to talk about is the finding on dynastic wealth. So we tend to celebrate, as a people, we are real excited about this idea of generational wealth. And we're real excited about the fact that maybe it's going to be generational wealth that changes the economic narrative. There was an article. Some of you may remember it. American Express. They introduced this statistic: African American women, fastest growing group of entrepreneurs in the country. And I remember that report because I used it in my personal statement to apply to grad school in 2016. Um, so that report came out in 2016, and I was like, we need to be a part of this. But at the same time, I was looking at if African American women are the fastest growing group of entrepreneurs, why, by and large, are Black families and Black communities, why are we still in a similar position that we were, 20, 40 years ago? And as I continued to do the research and compared it to how we were celebrating this idea of generational wealth, it still came down to there is something missing. There's something missing. And it just so happened that I was getting close to wrapping up my dissertation and came across a dissertation from the 1990s. And in the reference section of this dissertation that was published in the 1990s, they referenced the article that said Black women, not African American, because we hadn't advanced that much yet. Black women were the fastest growing group of business owners. So in the 1990s, they were saying the same thing that had been published in 2018, 2016. And it struck me as I was almost, in psychology, they call it a disorienting dilemma. It's where you experience something that really like sends you into a tailspin. It's almost like you're in the twilight zone. Because how could we be celebrating the same research for 30 years and nothing was different? How could reports on the racial wealth gap and ideas about generational wealth and Black realtors and Black home ownership, but nothing was different? And so as I got closer and closer to the end of my research, this is where I began studying these high net worth and ultra high net worth families, the Rockefellers. Everybody talks about the Rockefellers when they talk about generational wealth. There's also the Walton family, the Walmart family. There's the Mars family, the Koch family, the Vanderbilts, right? There are all these families that are not even using the language generational wealth. They do not speak like that. They don't use that kind of language. They don't talk about generational wealth. They don't have family reunions, right? And so in these Dynastic Wealth Family Calls, what I'm hoping to do is transfer the knowledge that I've come across through my research and through my lived experience and working with my own family to begin to build our dynasty. So I want to pause there. I see there's some activity in the chat, but definitely if there are questions, if there anything that anyone wants to elevate or ask before I actually say what dynastic wealth is, because I hadn't done that. So excited, but I'm gonna pause there for any questions or comments. Okay, I'm going through the chat. Everybody good then? Make sure that you're checking the chat for introductions. There's some folks that should be connecting with each other, and if y'all don't do it on your own, then I'll make the introductions for you. Okay, cool. Okay, so getting here. So this report, and now if you all want the slides, I'll make sure that you get access to them. But this is the report that introduced me to this idea of a wealth dynasty. So we've heard of Dynasty, the TV show. If you're a political junkie, then you probably have heard of political dynasties like the Kennedy family, the Bush family. If you're a historian, right, you may be familiar with the Ming dynasty from ancient history, right? But an entrepreneurial dynasty, that was new to me, even after having been an entrepreneur for maybe 8 years. By the time I came across this, have a master's in business, teaching entrepreneurship, had never heard of this term. And as I read through this report, and the Institute for Policy Studies, they issue this billionaire bonanza every year. It just so happened that in 2018, as I was getting ready to do the literature review on my dissertation, they issued a report on inherited wealth dynasties. And so what what came out of that was the idea or the research that showed that out of, because the Forbes 400, 1/3 of America's wealthiest 400 families, 1/3 of those current leaders, CEOs, had inherited their wealth from previous generations of entrepreneurs in their family. So when we talk about the Rockefeller family, we don't always make the connection that John D. Rockefeller, the founder of Standard Oil, was an entrepreneur in 1901. Probably because we didn't really have a language back then, but he deeply, truly embodied the definition of an entrepreneur. He found a problem, he created a solution, and he monetized the solution. So that particular report showed that out of the 400 families who were among America's wealthiest, 1/3 of them had inherited wealth. And what that means for those of us who are, doing all the things, going to all the conferences, signing up for all the technical assistance, small business development centers, and minority business development agencies. And the goal is to make something better for our families now, for the elders in our family, and for future generations that aren't here yet, but we don't really have the manual. What is how do we actually do it? Because it's easy to ideate and think about what life could look like once we do experience economic mobility, and once we do have, whatever our definitions of success are, once it is cemented. But how do we get there? So one of the things, and I work with the Small Business Development Center probably about 10 years ago now. And so small business development centers, MBDAs, those are what's considered technical assistance. And your technical assistance program is a design for the most part to help you learn a lot of these things where you see under financial wealth. You'll talk with a counselor about your brand identity, your pricing, how are you positioning yourself against your competitors. They'll even maybe get you into developing a standard operations procedure where you're documenting how your business runs. But that's about the extent of the type of technical assistance that you'll get from, or the type of assistance that you'll get from a traditional technical assistance model. These dynastic families, though, they are not just concerned with financial wealth. They are not just concerned with money. They are I did the research that demonstrates how they're actually doing it. They're actually creating 5 forms of wealth. So first of all, if you're from a socially or economically disadvantaged background and you're a business owner, you're already a unicorn, right? And you're probably the only entrepreneur in your family. So now you're 2 times the unicorn. And for the most part, at least from what I learned as I in my work with entrepreneurs, like no matter how hard it gets, no matter how isolating or frustrating, and this was me 2 days ago, like ready to quit, throw in the towel, right? There's something that happens, and specifically for first generation wealth creators. So not just entrepreneurs, but wealth creators. So whether you're getting that through your real estate investments, from your 401k, from your personal stock, wherever the wealth is being created, one of the things that I found for first generation wealth creators from Black and Brown communities is we are often committed to doing this work, as hard as it is, as isolating as it is, because of what's called a generative script. And a script, right, is just like if how actors, they read a script. A generative script is what you're telling yourself about, why am I still doing this? These students made me so frustrated. I don't feel like nothing I'm saying matters, but I can't stop doing it because I'm working to create something better for them. I'm working to create something better for my clients. I'm working to create something better for my grandchildren. And you're doing that based on this identity that you have about yourself, but we don't always have the language for it. So the main thing about how a dynastic family begins in a Black family is usually around, what do we want to do for future generations? Not just how am I going to get it for me today? how am I going to get it for me? And if I have to give it up to the next generation before I can become the beneficiary of it, even that becomes the driver in a lot of the work that we do, especially as, again, first generation wealth creators. So I don't want to get too deep into that because there's still some distinctions. So these dynastic families, one, they are focused on, and they operationalize this. They build this into their business that they're working for 3 generations at a time. So to reach dynastic status, your family has to control either the wealth that you're creating through your business or the assets that you are creating through your investment for 3 consecutive generations. That's the first distinction between generational wealth and dynastic wealth is 3 generations. And we'll talk about how they operationalize that, how they build it into their business. The second distinction is the directions that wealth is transferred. So when we hear generational wealth, if you're talking about generational wealth, you're probably only thinking about passing money, right? So one of the 5 as forms of wealth, passing it down for 2, maybe 3 generations, right? But our dynastic counterparts, they have 4 directions that they are transferring their assets and wealth into. They pass money and other forms of wealth down. So some of you know that I'm mom to Sparrow, or you met Sparrow, some of you. So I can pass wealth down to Sparrow. I can pass wealth across to my sister. I can pass wealth across to my cousins. So those are lateral transfers of wealth, or I can pass wealth up to my mom and my aunts and uncles. And when my grandmother was with us, I could pass wealth up to her. So those are 3 generations, 4 directions, and then we also saw the 5 forms of wealth, which we'll start to unpack. But Rose, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Happy Sunday, everyone. So quick question on this, and I'm sorry because it's my engineering mind that's making me, and you know how I'm
I
give
love it.
analysis.
I love
So
it.
with dynastic wealth, does it start with the understanding that when, especially me as being a first, I feel like I'm like the starting point as a business owner. With dynastic wealth, does dynastic wealth start after me or with me? And the
Mhm.
reason I ask this is because even though I own my business, looking at our family and everything at a holistic level, I'm in the red.
Mhm.
As with many Black entrepreneurs, we are starting behind. And so it takes a while for us to get to the green. And when I say green, it's not even just making a profit, it's green in terms of net worth and all of that stuff. You already know.
Mhm.
So does my dynastic wealth timeline or you know
Mhm.
uh journey, does that start after me with the next person, or is that starting with me? I'm so sorry.
That's
I know it's a tough
no,
question.
no, no, no. Please don't apologize. That's a great question. So there's a book that I came across. Is literally the title of the book is Dynasties, and one of the chapters because actually used this quote verbatim in my dissertation. It said the founders of dynasties, and they were looking at the automobile industry. They saw themselves. So you have to see your family can't reach dynastic status until you see yourself as the creator of a dynasty. And so when you begin to take on that identity, then that begins to transfer. It shows up in how you run the business, how you expose your daughter to the business, your cousins, nieces, nephews, right? So there has to be someone that sees themselves and identifies as the founder of the dynasty, like it's literally going to start with you, kind of thing. Now in actuality, like how that's going to show up in my family and I, we started working on this in probably January of 2021, December of 2020 or January 2021, and we're still doing the work. We've just gotten to the place where we have a draft of what we want our trust to look like to get to the estate planner. And it's not until the trust is actually becomes a real thing. Well, we had, like I said, before my grandmother passed, there were 4 generations. So it would have been a dynasty because there were already three generations that had the wherewithal, the business savvy, the intellect to control our assets, right? Now our 3rd generation is Sparrow's age. So it's going to take that youngest generation to have the same thing. So not everybody's going to be an entrepreneur, not everybody's going to be a lawyer, but they have enough savvy, they have enough skill to control the assets. So it's not about, I didn't come across anything that said there was a particular net worth or monetary value around it. It's really the number of generations of control. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. And so what that means is we like the dynasty, your family dynasty literally can take as long as you want it to take. I'll also say that not everybody in your family is going to want to be a part of it, and you just got to give them grace and give them space. Not everybody is going to, like in my family, we literally had no family assets. A lot of the time that it took for us to get to this place was agreeing on how are we gonna pay for this thing. Like we spent a lot of time talking about where are the assets coming from, and we finally got to the place where we decided that, and there were there were about 19 of us that would come on, have the conversations, do the activities and exercises and all those things. We finally decided that 16 tax-paying adults, we would just put in $1,000 a year for 3 years and let it build up before we made a real estate investment purchase, or before we acquired a business, or before we put money in stock. Like we needed to build up enough of the coffers to make a really big investment so that we can start to see some traction in the returns. So it took us 3 years to get on the same page about the documentation. It's going to take us another 3 years to let the money build up. And then we're going to, so it's not quantitative. And that was one of the main things that comes from the research, is that it's more about these qualitative forms of wealth. And these are the things that we are not being taught. Black and brown communities, especially Black families and Black communities, we've been socialized to think that wealth is only money. We've been conditioned to think that if we aren't producing something with our bodies or with our hands, right? Think of how chattel slavery went. Like the worth of a slave was based on what they thought they could do with your body. And so some of that still stays with us, but we haven't learned yet that our family values, our family recipes, like grandma's house, those are different forms of wealth as well. I want to say, and I don't know if it's malicious, I don't know if it's intentional, but these are the things that we haven't been taught for a very strong reason. Like, imagine how powerful our families and our communities will be if we stop and say, we're not doing that, because that's not who we are. That's not a part of our family identity, right? So a part of the family calls will be kind of breaking down each of these component parts. What do they mean? How do they look? Where are you stuck as you try to implement them in your families, with your community, whether you have kids or not? Because we know there are some old white women that leave their entire estates to their dogs and to their cats and to their universities. So surely there's a niece or nephew or god sister that you might have in mind, if you don't have children, that you might want to build and create something for through this generative script. So let me pause for questions. We're getting kind of to quarter till. Just want to see if there are any questions before I introduce this to you a bit further. Reading through. Go ahead, Sam. You're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to say hello, everyone. Big fan of yours, Dr. White. I think you're doing very important work. And I have two questions and a couple of comments, and I'm trying to and they meet somewhere. But let me start with this. My first question is, in your research, right? Do you see any cultural patterns regarding entrepreneurship? And I think I know what your answer will be, but go ahead.
Yeah, for certain. One part of the research looks at immigrant entrepreneurs because a lot of times the argument comes, well, and there are particular studies around Cuban. I grew up in Miami, so Cuban entrepreneurs, but I know there's more research emerging now around immigrant entrepreneurs from the continent. Not yet from the Caribbean though, so
Right.
maybe that's something we need to work on.
Right. And my question follow up with that, you spoke about language, and language is very important because, to be honest, it's since I start following your work and going to the in the lab where you had those workshops. What's the name of the
Launchpad.
Launchpad, right? I
Mm-hmm.
started thinking because I grew up in Jamaica. My grandmother, she was the matriarch of the family. We have a grocery shop. We had a restaurant. My father was a tailor. He probably trained half of Kingston to be tailors and stuff. My aunt had her own grocery business, and we didn't think of ourselves as entrepreneurs. A lot of people call it hustling. Now, the point I'm getting at, right? When we just say it's hustling, it kind of makes it seem less important, right? In other spaces, they would say, "Oh, we're forming a business, or we're forming an empire, or something like that," right? So, but we call it hustling, right? If we says we're entrepreneurial business people, I think we'll take it more seriously and see the potential of it. So I just want to point out that when you say the language is important, I really connect to that. Also, when you spoke about generational wealth being more than just money, that's extremely important because I know you have heard the observations that with wealth is lost by the third generation, something like that, right? You build it and then you pass it on to your kids, and then by your grandkids, they're spoiled and everybody is like broke again. So that kind of resonated with me when you say that you have to teach people how to take care of it, kind of, sort of, in terms of generational wealth. You pass it on to your kids, but if they don't know how to manage it, right, it's just going to get lost to the ether. So that's just what I wanted to comment on. That's it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Any other thoughts or comments want to be elevated? I'll bring it back to what you were sharing, Sam, about the third generation though. Everybody good? Okay, so in private wealth communities, so let me see. I'll just read out some of the comments. So mind shift is definitely needed. Rose shares, most only see it as a hustle because it's a quick and temporary fix to a problem. So true. And that's referred to as from the academic perspective. And this is also to help everyone have the language as well, right? So when you are talking to founder investors or venture capitalists, depending on where you are in your founder journey, you can talk to them from this academic perspective to elevate your pitch. But that's in academia is referred to as necessity-based entrepreneurship. I did some research on that, and we'll go through that as we're talking more and meeting more on the calls. But necessity-based versus opportunity-based entrepreneurship, and while there haven't been any research that I've come across, any peer-reviewed research that I've come across, most of the necessity-based entrepreneurs are from Black and Brown communities because we're always trying, to your point, Rose, having to fix a problem. Sometimes on the opportunity-based side, it's because you can recognize that there's something emerging from the market, but you happen to have the resources to capitalize on the opportunity. So, like I said, I hadn't found any research that says most of these are Black and Brown, necessity-based Black and Brown, and most of the opportunity-based are not Black or Brown. But from what I've seen, that happens a lot. Lisa, are you raising your hand? Did you want to share something? Go ahead.
What I wanted to ask, well, I don't know. Okay, Miss Melinda made a post about the wealth. The first generation makes it, the second generation maintains it, and the third generation destroys it. What I think is different about what you're proposing is that things are in place so that the second generation understands what needs to be done, and they can't just run through what's going to be happening with that the first generation put to the second generation, and the third generation definitely ain't going to be the ones that's going to mess it up, because they're going to understand that this is because of this first generation that gave that to them. So it's the trust and everything is set up. You ain't no trust fund baby where you gonna get the money and roll off somewhere and we ain't gonna never hear no more about what happened. Because it might not be I have to come back and haunt you if you take my money and act crazy with it. You feel me? That I'm sorry. That's just my little comment. I'm sorry.
I love it. I love it, Lisa. Rose, I see you. I just want to share kind of to Melinda's point, that saying that I've come across, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. It's literally, so I have on a long sleeve shirt. I don't know if y'all can see, but what they say is the first generation is literally rolling up. They're in like work clothes. They're rolling up their shirt sleeves. And from a social science perspective, they don't always have the capacity to show up for their children, right? Because they're so focused on providing. Like, that was my experience. And what ends up happening is the second generations, they say, are in silk sleeves because they become the the beneficiaries of all that hard work. But because they didn't know how it was generated, because they didn't know what it took to really get it, they took it for granted. And so not so much that the third generation destroys it, but that there's nothing left to pass down to them from the research that I had done. And so that third generation is back rolling up their shirt sleeves because to Lisa's point, the knowledge wasn't transferred. The insight wasn't transferred. The ropes to skip, as we say in SBI, the ropes to skip and the ropes to know, like that information wasn't transferred. So I just wanted to add that to the conversation as well. Go ahead, Rose.
Yeah, I wanted to add to the same conversation. I think a good example of the opposite of this is Korean. They call them chaebols. Culture, because I'm very into Korean dramas, but they have chaebols where, like when you're talking about Nokia, I'm thinking of who's Korean Samsung. They are the epitome of dynasties, and their kids, when people have kids, when I tell you these kids are ingrained into the business from birth, they are, as soon as they get of age, they are, put on track to learn about business and learn about business with that business. They work in the business, and then they even start from the business from the bottom. Like, they don't come in and they're like directors. No, they have them interning and starting from the bottom, and they have to go and raise themselves up. And so these kids are ingrained into the business and know about the business, and their expectation is to take, at least the oldest or whoever it is to take over that business for the family, and then it stays. Now, they have a board, just like, we have board members and stuff and chairmen, but the understanding is the only way for them to not be in the business is to have someone who's incompetent, like a child that came up and didn't know. But in order for them to secure it, is that they have the kids go and get the education, know about the business from ground up. So there isn't a way for the board to vote them out. They actually grew in this business, and they're the best candidate. But they are like to the T about keeping that within the family and ensuring that those kids are set up and ready to go when the time comes.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely right. And so that's one of the things, that's a great example Rose, about how I was saying they operationalize the dynasty. They build the dynasty's operation into the business. So the children are on the payroll, like, and even here in the States, we get that, right? You can pay your child up to $12,000 on the payroll, and they can learn the business as they're being paid for it. That decreases your adjusted gross income, then like, it's all of these things that we just hadn't been exposed to. So a part of the work that we'll be doing together in the Dynastic Wealth Family Calls are sharing your knowledge as a tax professional, right? So what are some of those things that haven't been elevated in the broader discussion or the broader discourse, especially for Black and Brown entrepreneurs? LaTanya, go ahead.
Hi everyone. I was also thinking, and while I'm listening to everyone, and I think everyone makes some really great, strong points. But I think another issue that never really gets discussed is how we communicate, passing on down business acumen to our lineage. I think oftentimes when people start a business or establish a business, or even ones that are like the more prominent named type of people that we talk about, it's always discussed in the sense of legacy. Oh, this is for my son. When he gets older, he can have the family business. I can hand over the reins, but never talk about applicable skills. I'm looking at it from the lens of workforce development and applying the applicable skills from early on, from the early ages. Even if the child decides to grow up and they want to do something else, which I think that's really important to really kind of honor, but they at least will have the foundation of the skill set needed to, if they decide to go off and do their own thing, and then at some point they decide, I'm change course, I want to go back and commit to building this family dynasty up. They'll have the skills and the applicable acumen in place, so they can go right in there and maintain or even build on it and expand it or whatever it needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
I think that gets lost a lot, because I think a lot of the times we look at it from a legacy, something to hand down from generation to generation, and it's kind of brought out like more in a dream fantasy kind of a way, rather than, this is how, these are the steps that I took, or that was needed in order to get this going, or whatever the case may be. These are the skills that we need to kind of keep it going, running, and keep it not just going afloat, but we want to build on it. Now I want to instill in you those principles and those skill sets for you to apply it. Whether you decide you want to come in and help build this family dynasty together, or if you want to go out and mark your own territory, do your own thing, you are already set.
Right.
You
And so I
understand where I'm
brought
going with that? So
yeah, no, that's great. And I brought the framework back up because the dynastic wealth is a comprehensive solution. So also in social sciences, there's this concept called a wicked problem. And wicked problems are so pervasive. They touch so many different points of our life. And when we're talking about the racial wealth gap, most of it is only about, remember, financial wealth. But what you're talking about, LaTanya, comes into relational wealth. And that's this exposure piece, right? And not everybody's going to be an entrepreneur. Not every dynastic family has to start with an entrepreneur, but I promise you, if you've ever tried to talk to a group of Black people that you're related to about money, you're probably already aware that you require a thick enough skin, this level of resilience, this comfort level with risk that most entrepreneurs already have. So, LaTanya, what you're referring to is this pre-exposure element to entrepreneurial thinking and problem solving, but it also is leadership development, right? Because leadership development is all about, how do I take stock and inventory of the skills that I have, and I know where to transfer them to. So with the racial wealth gap being such a wicked problem, this socially pervasive problem, it's not going to come down to, like, it's not just the responsibility of the business schools or college, right? It's what's happening at home, it's happening at school, it's happening at church. These are all these different facets of where Black identity is formed. And if there are more and more places where the discussion is around how we each play this role in creating dynasties in our family and in our communities, and through that we're closing the racial wealth gap, then it won't be so like out of this world to hear somebody talking about these kinds of things. Go ahead, Sam.
Hey, Dr. White. So just wanted to add to that. One of the things I see, especially as an educator, I'll have students, I'll have family, I'll have parents calling about their awards and trying to blame me for how their awards are doing. That leads to make me think that sometimes our own culture works against us, where we try to. So let me put it another way. I work hard. I don't want my kid to go through that. You probably see where I'm going with this. So it's like I work hard, I struggle. I don't want my kid to go through that. When the fact is, sometimes a little struggle can help them to carry on that dynasty and stuff like that. So sometimes you have to realize that it's tough love is important. We can't just baby them and say, hey, you know what? I'm not going to let them go through this. And I keep saying that because I hear it so much. So we lose an opportunity to teach them. That's what I'm getting at, and show them that a little effort is essential for survival sometimes with regards to dynastic wealth and stuff. So I just want to say that before I forget.
Yeah, for sure. And I know, I think in early learning, so like in K-12, I think they call that the productive struggle. So especially with the STEM subjects and, science and math, the more that a student, and this still comes from the exposure piece. So there's a part of the research that refers to entrepreneurial persistence. And it says that the earlier, so while we have the littlest ones, right, the little kids and little grandkids, little nieces and nephews, the earlier they're exposed to entrepreneurship, STEM, all of these things, all of these kinds of conversations, the more likely they will be to persist when they are faced with struggles and challenges. So we're doing, like, this is the day, right? So on this day, June 30th, 2024, this is the day that we together can say, this is when I began actively working to build my family dynasty. This was the day that I began to actively be aware of all of the other parts of what it means to transfer wealth and not just money. So just out of respect for everyone's time, because I promise y'all I could talk about this all day, but I made, I set the event from 5 to 6 Eastern. So I think some of us are in different parts of the country, maybe a different time zone, but I do want to be respectful of everyone's schedule. The last thing that I want to share is just, again, the financial wealth. So I'm going to be doing this. I'm going to be doing this every Sunday at this time, no matter where I am in the world, because when I left teaching, I told my former boss that I wanted to be in a space that centered Black entrepreneurship. I hadn't yet finished my dissertation. I didn't know that I was going to be talking about dynastic wealth, and that I wanted to be in a place that centered Black entrepreneurs learning how to create dynastic wealth. But now that I'm in that space, then this is the work that I'm dedicated to doing. So I have to be clear, though, in saying that without financial wealth, although there is no baseline, there's no floor, no minimum net worth that determines whether you're a dynasty. We all have to experience economic mobility, right? And so without financial wealth, we won't really have anything else to pass down, because the financial wealth creates the breathing room. Because you know how relaxed you feel when you ain't got to worry about, well, how is the mortgage gonna get paid, or the lights gonna be on when I turn this switch on, right? Like, how relaxed feeling that's the feeling that we want to be able to create for these future generations. And that comes through having access to financial wealth. So a couple of things that I want to put on your radar is, let me go to, I should have had this tab open. Let's see, this right here. So I want to put something on your radar. It's the State Small Business Credit Initiative, SSBCI. The Department of Treasury, and let me just say this really quickly without being distracted by everything on the screen. The Department of Treasury recently reauthorized, and y'all know re means to do it again, right? So they authorized again a tranche or a pot of money, $125 million in money, to make sure that very small businesses and socially and economically disadvantaged businesses get access to technical assistance. Remember, I said that technical assistance typically focuses on the financial wealth pillar. There is $125 million of free business training and coaching out there that's been provided for entrepreneurs across the country. And it's through the Capital Readiness Program. So I'm gonna put the link in the chat. I want you, if you're not already familiar with the Capital Readiness Program, if you're not already connected to a Capital Readiness Program, that money is coming through the Minority Business Development Center, please get connected to a Capital Readiness Program. So the one that I work with, they're based in Miami, but a part of my work with them is to get everyone that comes through the program into the Dynastic Wealth Training Academy. And so this is a 7-week course. So Professor Pine, when you're talking about when I was coming into on FAMU's campus, this is the online version of that course. And this is where we go deep. You see there's a segment on each part of the Dynastic Wealth Framework. And then Sundays, we come in here. Where are you stuck? Who do you need to be introduced to? An estate planner, a CPA? What do you need to get to the next level in your business and in your dynasty? What do you need to unlock the next level with your dynasty? So $125 million in free technical assistance to get you on the path to $10 billion with a B, $10 billion from the State Small Business Credit Initiative. So it's a pipeline program basically to make sure that you're ready for capital. And if you are ready for capital, then it's to open the door to lenders, financial institutions, and even some states have venture capital funding. So if that's more up your speed versus like debt funding or loans, then $10 billion, y'all. So I want to make sure to share that because again, the financial wealth is important to ensure that your future self and then your future family members have the ability to relax and then self-actualize, because even a part of dynastic wealth is connected to Maslow's theory of needs. Like we have to have these basic needs met before we can reach self-mastery. So I'm a social scientist, right? And I bring all of those things into play with dynastic wealth. So how do we make sure that you're tapped into $125 million worth of free training and $10 billion worth of equity and debt financing so that you can build your family dynasty? I'm going to pause right there, open it up for questions. If you need to drop off, then please meet us here next Sunday, 5 p.m. Eastern. And we'll go from there. But questions, the floor is open for any commentary, any other questions. And if not, I go back to binge watching Will Trent because it's new to me.
Good question, LaTanya.
Yes,
on the
yes.
capital readiness program, because I saw that the link that you put in the chat was linked to Florida. So is this also directed through the states or is it at the federal?
So that's federal funding. But they found around, like, I think 43 different sites across the country. It doesn't matter where you are. You can be in Guam, the American Samoa, you could be in Puerto Rico, you could be wherever. But that link just connects you to, it tracks you back to gain access to the Dynastic Wealth Training Academy, because that's only through the Florida program.
Okay, gotcha. All right,
Yep.
thank you.
But it's important. Thank you so much for your feedback, everyone. I appreciate it. Definitely email me with any questions if you don't want to, if they're still kind of ruminating or formulating, email me with questions, and then I'll make sure to get you the answers or get you the resources if I don't have the answers myself. All right, everybody. So I hope to see you. Bring a friend, bring a family member next Sunday, and we'll keep building our dynasty. Yay. Thank you so much, Ebony. All right. Good night, everybody.